She was the kind of girl who could fade into a crowd and no one would notice her. Every day, she walked through the hallways carrying her books, her eyes mostly on the floor. She did not complain, did not demand attention, and never tried to be someone she was not. In the choir room, it was the same. She sat quietly in the back, trying to follow the notes, her fingers occasionally brushing the edges of the piano keys that stood in the corner. Most days, she stayed invisible, a shadow among more confident students. The choir leader was known to be strict and sharp-tongued. He demanded perfection and expected students to stand out and shine. Those who could sing loudly or hit high notes received praise, while anyone quieter, anyone less confident, was quickly dismissed or ignored. The girl often felt the sting of his words even when he did not speak directly to her. A sideways glance, a slight frown, a sarcastic comment aimed at someone else. All of it felt like it touched her. She would shrink into herself, wishing she could disappear entirely. She knew she was different, but she also knew there was something inside her that the world had not yet seen. She loved music more than anything. While others focused on social events, gossip, or being the center of attention, she spent her evenings at the piano. It was not just a hobby. It was where she felt alive. The keys responded to her touch in a way words never could. Each note she played carried her feelings, her dreams, and her fears. At home, she would practice for hours, her fingers dancing over the keys as if they were extensions of herself. Her family noticed, of course, but they did not always understand the depth of her talent. They encouraged her quietly, smiling as she played, but it was clear to them that her gift was something she carried inside herself rather than something for the world to see. At school, she had friends who were kind and supportive, but even they sometimes forgot to see her the way she wanted to be seen. They admired her ability to play piano during lunch breaks or small recitals, but they did not always know the courage it took for her to sit in front of an audience and play. She often felt the weight of judgment, imagining how harsh the choir leader would be if he ever noticed her talent. She was scared of being laughed at or dismissed, of being told she was not enough. One afternoon, the choir leader announced that the upcoming school event would include a special performance. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, whispering about solos and duets, about who would shine. She tried to stay quiet, hoping no one would notice her. She did not want attention. Not really, but a small part of her longed for a chance to prove herself. It was hard to keep that hope hidden when everyone around her talked about showing off their voices, their skills, their presence. As rehearsals began, the choir leader walked around the room, listening critically to each student. He would stop suddenly, correcting someone here, scolding someone there. When he came to her, he barely gave her a look. He made a dismissive comment, something about her being quiet and not having the energy to contribute to the performance. She nodded silently, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, and returned to her seat. The sting of his words lingered longer than she expected. She wanted to disappear, but at the same time, she wanted to show him and everyone else that she was capable of so much more. That evening, she sat at her piano at home, staring at the keys. She had learned new pieces she had been excited to play, pieces that challenged her fingers and her mind. She thought about the choir leader's comment and felt a mix of anger and determination. He had no idea what she could do, and maybe he never would. Still, the music called to her, and she could not resist answering. She started playing softly at first, the sound filling the small room. Each note was deliberate, each chord a reflection of her mood. She closed her eyes and let herself get lost in the music, feeling the tension in her body ease with every melody. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, dancing over the keys. She played faster, more complicated pieces, challenging herself. She could feel the excitement building inside her, a warmth spreading from her chest to her fingertips. This was the part of herself that no one at school had seen yet. This was the part that mattered most, the core of her love for music. She played late into the night, ignoring the clock, ignoring the world outside, completely immersed in the sound she created. The next day at school, she carried a quiet pride. She had spent hours practicing, and though no one knew it, she felt ready for the next rehearsal. The choir leader continued to be critical, and her peers continued to chatter about their chances to perform. But she felt a subtle shift inside her. She realized that her talent was hers first, not something she needed validation for, though she secretly hoped for it. She started to look at the piano in the choir room differently, imagining what it could feel like to play in front of others, to let the music speak for her. Rehearsals continued, and the tension in the choir room was palpable. Students competed for the leader's approval, and anyone who did not conform was often overlooked. She observed quietly, learning from each rehearsal, noticing how the leader reacted, how the audience might respond. She did not speak much, but she listened. She absorbed the energy in the room, the highs and lows, the moments of laughter and frustration. Each day, her confidence grew a little, fed by her private practice and the thought that one day, she might be ready to step forward. A friend who noticed her quiet determination approached her one day, asking if she would ever consider playing piano at the school event. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready. The thought of being in front of so many people, under the critical eyes of the choir leader, made her stomach twist. But the friend encouraged her gently, reminding her of the hours she had spent practicing, of the skill she had honed in secret. She nodded slowly, feeling a small flicker of hope. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding at least a little. As the day of the performance drew closer, the choir room felt more tense. Students rehearsed relentlessly, the choir leader pacing back and forth, giving orders, correcting mistakes. She watched quietly from her seat, her mind replaying the melodies she had been practicing at home. Each note, each chord, each scale had been a preparation, even if she did not yet know it. She could feel her heart beating faster, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She was still the quiet girl in the back, still overlooked by most, but there was a spark inside her that refused to be dimmed. During a break, she approached the piano in the choir room, her fingers brushing the keys. She played a simple melody softly, almost to herself. Some students glanced at her curiously, but most were too caught up in their rehearsals to notice. She felt a calm wash over her, the music grounding her in a way nothing else could. In that moment, she made a silent promise. One day, she would play for everyone, and they would see the talent she had nurtured in the quiet hours when no one was watching. The choir leader's sharp voice echoed across the room, calling students to attention, preparing them for the next section of rehearsal. She returned to her seat, but her fingers lingered in the air, imagining the music, feeling its rhythm and flow. The ridicule she had experienced was still there, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also a growing confidence, a sense of purpose that the leader could not see. The music was hers, and it gave her strength. As the day ended and students packed their things, she lingered for a moment, playing softly for herself. The hallways emptied, leaving her alone with the sound she created. The piano keys under her fingers seemed to whisper encouragement, telling her that her time would come. She did not yet know how it would happen or when, but she knew she could no longer ignore the music inside her. The choir leader's ridicule would not define her. Her talent was real, and soon others would realize it too. Walking home that evening, she felt a quiet excitement. The world outside the choir room seemed less intimidating, the voices of doubt less loud. She carried the melodies in her mind, imagining how they would sound if she played them for an audience. The thought both thrilled and scared her, but she could not deny it. She had a gift, a skill nurtured through patience and love, and it was waiting for the right moment to shine. That night, she sat at her piano again, letting her fingers dance freely. She played everything she had learned, every piece she had practiced in secret. The room was filled with the sound of her talent, pure and unfiltered. She smiled to herself, knowing that even if the choir leader did not see it, even if her peers overlooked her, the music was real. It was alive. And one day, it would speak for her in a way that words never could. She woke up that morning with the feeling that something was about to change. The sunlight streamed gently through her window, casting a warm glow over her room. She glanced at her piano, sitting patiently in the corner as if it knew the thoughts racing through her mind. Yesterday's rehearsal had left her restless. the melodies she had played over and over in her head echoing softly. Today, she felt a little braver, a little more ready to face the world beyond her practice room. At breakfast, her family noticed a quiet determination in her eyes. They smiled, exchanging a glance that said they understood without words. They had seen her dedication, the countless hours she had spent with her fingers on the keys, the evenings lost in music that spoke more than words ever could. One of them asked if she had thought about performing at the upcoming school event. She hesitated, stirring her cereal slowly, unsure if she could actually do it. The idea of playing in front of the choir leader, in front of all those students, filled her with a mixture of excitement and fear. She nodded slightly, careful not to show too much emotion. Inside, though, her heart raced. At school, the atmosphere was electric. Students moved through the hallways, buzzing about the event, talking about solos, duets, and who would shine the most. She felt the usual pang of nervousness, wishing she could remain invisible. But today, she noticed something different. Every time she thought about the piano, she felt a spark of courage. She decided to make a small move, just to see what might happen. She slipped quietly into the choir room before the others arrived and approached the piano. Her fingers brushed over the keys, lightly at first, playing a simple melody that made her heart beat faster. The sound filled the room, and for a moment, she imagined how it might feel to play in front of others, to let the music speak for her. Rehearsal began, and the choir leader paced around the room, correcting students, pointing out mistakes, and demanding more energy. She stayed in the back, quietly listening and watching. Occasionally, her eyes would flick toward the piano, imagining the notes she could play if only given a chance. She was ready to keep this talent to herself, but a small part of her wondered what it would be like to finally share it. That curiosity grew stronger as the rehearsal continued, and she realized she might not be able to resist for much longer. During a break, a friend who had always noticed her quiet determination approached her. "You should really think about playing at the event," the friend said gently. "You have a gift and people need to hear it. I know you're scared, but you'd be amazing." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. The thought of standing in front of everyone, facing the critical eyes of the choir leader, made her stomach twist. Still, she felt a flicker of hope, a tiny ember that refused to go out. Maybe it was time to take a small step, to see what could happen if she let the music out into the world. After school, she stayed behind in the choir room while the other students left. She sat at the piano, fingers hovering over the keys, and took a deep breath. Slowly, she began to play. At first, it was a gentle, simple melody, one she had practiced many times. But as the notes flowed, her confidence grew. She played louder, adding more emotion, more complexity, testing her abilities. Each note gave her courage. Each chord strengthened her resolve. She was alone, yet it felt like the room was alive with her music. It was a secret world she had built, and today she stepped fully into it. A few students passing by the window stopped and peeked in, curious about the soft music escaping the room. They watched quietly, noticing the grace with which she moved her fingers, the focus in her eyes. No one entered, and no one disturbed her, but she felt their silent attention and it made her feel something new. A sense that maybe the world outside would understand her gift if she allowed it. She did not know how far this would go, but she felt ready to find out. The next day at school, she approached the choir leader quietly, careful not to draw attention. She asked if it might be possible to play a short piano piece during the rehearsal, a small interlude that could fit with the other students' performances. The choir leader raised an eyebrow, surprised by her request. "Are you sure about that?" he asked, with a tone that was equal parts doubt and curiosity. She nodded, swallowing her fear, and explained that she wanted to try something simple, just to see how it sounded. The choir leader gave a small nod, not expecting much, and allowed her to set up at the piano. As she positioned herself, she felt her heart pounding. The other students gathered around, some curious, some skeptical. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes started softly, almost hesitantly, but with each passing moment, Her fingers moved more confidently. The melody filled the room, and she could sense the shift in the air. Conversations stopped, whispers faded, and all eyes turned toward the piano. The music seemed to capture everyone's attention, holding them in a quiet spell. The choir leader, who had been walking around the room, froze. His expression shifted from skepticism to surprise. He stopped mid-step and listened. He had never heard her play like this before. The melody was intricate yet gentle, powerful yet restrained. Every note carried emotion, a story he had not expected. She kept her focus on the keys, pouring her feelings into the music, not caring about the reactions around her. And yet, she could sense them, the gasps, the soft murmurs of admiration, the wide-eyed looks of awe. When the piece ended, there was a moment of stunned silence. No one spoke, no one moved. Then, slowly, the room erupted in quiet applause. Students exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling widely. Even the choir leader, who had been so harsh and critical just days before, seemed momentarily speechless. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but the respect in his eyes was undeniable. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging that he had underestimated her. She felt a rush of relief and pride. For the first time, she realized that her talent could speak louder than any words or ridicule. After rehearsal, a few students came up to her, complimenting her playing, asking how long she had been practicing. She answered quietly, but inside, she felt a warm glow of happiness. She had taken a risk, faced her fear, and discovered that her music had the power to connect with others. The choir leader approached her later, his tone less harsh than usual. "You have a real gift," he said almost reluctantly. "I didn't expect that. Keep practicing, and we might be able to include you in the event after all." She nodded, feeling a mix of pride and determination. This was just the beginning, and she knew it. Over the next few days, she continued to practice, her confidence growing with every note. She experimented with new pieces, tried different melodies, and allowed herself to feel the joy of creating music openly. At home, her family noticed the change in her demeanor. She was more lively, more expressive, and there was a sparkle in her eyes that had not been there before. They encouraged her gently, helping her rehearse, offering advice, and sharing in her excitement. The piano was no longer just a private refuge. It was becoming a bridge to the world outside. At school, whispers began to circulate. Students talked about her talent, some in awe, some in disbelief. The choir leader, who had once dismissed her, started to pay attention, quietly observing her progress. She did not seek recognition, but it found her anyway. She realized that by embracing her gift, she had opened the door to possibilities she had only imagined. The music had given her courage, and courage had given her a chance to be seen. One afternoon, she stayed late again, practicing a challenging piece she hoped to play at the upcoming event. The room was quiet except for the sound of her fingers moving across the keys. She lost herself in the music, imagining the audience, imagining the applause, imagining the moment when she would finally stand in front of everyone and let her talent shine. It was both thrilling and terrifying, but she felt ready. She had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. Her friend stopped by, peeking into the room. "You're amazing," the friend said softly. "I can't wait for everyone to hear you play." She smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. The support of her friend, combined with her own practice and determination, gave her a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The music was no longer just for her. It was for anyone willing to listen. As the school day ended, she walked home with a lightness in her step. She felt alive in a way that was new, a sense of anticipation for what was to come. The choir leader's criticism no longer held the same power over her. She knew her talent was real, and she had already begun to show it. The event was still ahead, and there would be challenges, but she felt ready to face them. Her music had begun to speak for her, and soon, everyone else would have no choice but to listen. The day of the rehearsal felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mix of excitement and nerves among the students. She walked into the choir room, carrying her music sheets carefully, her fingers brushing the edges of the piano as she passed it. Her heart was pounding. She knew that today might be the day she would have to face not just the audience, but also the choir leader who had ridiculed her before. She tried to calm herself with deep breaths, imagining the notes she would play, the melodies that had become her companion over countless evenings. The choir leader began the rehearsal with his usual sharp tone, correcting students and pointing out mistakes. She stayed quietly in her corner, listening, watching, and feeling the familiar mix of fear and determination. Then, unexpectedly, he turned to her. "Why don't you play something for us today?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. The words hit her like a cold wind. She felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Her stomach twisted with nerves. She wanted to say no, to hide, to pretend she was invisible again, but something inside her refused. This was the moment she had been preparing for, even if she had not known it would come like this. She nodded slowly, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. She walked to the piano, her friends watching quietly, some with curiosity, others with encouragement in their eyes. The choir leader leaned back slightly, arms crossed, waiting for what he probably thought would be a weak, unremarkable performance. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. She sat at the piano and took a deep breath, feeling the cool keys beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the familiar comfort of the music calm her racing heart. As she began to play, the first notes were tentative, soft, almost shy. She felt the eyes of everyone on her, the whispers and doubts hovering like shadows. But with each chord, each note, she gained confidence. Her fingers moved more freely, the melody flowing naturally from her mind into the room. The simple melody transformed into something more complex, richer, and full of feeling. She played with every ounce of emotion she had, allowing herself to be vulnerable, letting the music tell her story in a way words never could. The students who had been skeptical at first began to lean in, their eyes widening in surprise. The whispers stopped. Even the choir leader, who had been smirking moments before, froze. He tilted his head slightly, listening more closely. He had heard her play in the past, but this was different. This was not a timid attempt. This was powerful, precise, and full of emotion. The room felt like it had grown smaller, as if the music had drawn everyone closer, wrapping them in its spell. She continued, her confidence growing with every note. Her fingers danced across the keys, expressing feelings she had kept hidden for so long. Anger, frustration, hope, joy, and determination all poured into the music. She was no longer just a quiet girl at the back of the choir. She was the music itself. The notes seemed to rise and fall with her emotions, carrying them to every corner of the room. The choir leader's eyes widened slightly, his posture stiffening. He had never expected to hear such skill from someone he had dismissed so quickly. A few students exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from doubt to admiration. Some even whispered to each other, amazed at the talent they had overlooked. The music was captivating, holding them in a quiet awe. She could feel the energy in the room changing, a mix of surprise and respect settling over the students. Her nerves faded, replaced by a growing sense of pride. For the first time, she realized that her talent could not be hidden. Not anymore. The music demanded to be heard. As she reached the crescendo of her piece, the room was completely silent except for the sound of the piano. Every note landed with precision and emotion, filling the space with a richness that was impossible to ignore. The choir leader opened his mouth, perhaps to interject, but the music held him back. He listened, caught in a moment of disbelief. He had ridiculed her before, laughed at her quiet demeanor, and underestimated her entirely. Now he had no words, only the stark realization of the talent he had overlooked. The piece ended, the final note hanging in the air like a breath waiting to be released. There was a moment of stunned silence. The students blinked, some staring at the piano, some at her, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began. At first hesitant, then growing louder as more students joined in, clapping for the girl who had been quiet, overlooked, and underestimated. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had faced her fear and played her heart out for everyone to hear. The choir leader stepped forward, his face unreadable for a moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, I did not expect that. Well done. The words were few, but they carried weight. It was an acknowledgement, an acceptance of her talent that she had longed for, even if she had not known it would feel so validating. She nodded respectfully, her fingers still hovering over the keys, feeling the power of the music she had created. Her friends approached her, smiles on their faces, their admiration clear. That was incredible, one said. You're amazing. How long have you been playing like that? Another student added, I can't believe we never noticed before. You're really talented. She felt a flush of happiness, grateful for their support. The ridicule of the past no longer held power over her. She had proven to herself, and now to others, that her talent was real and undeniable. Over the next few rehearsals, things began to change. The choir leader, while still strict, treated her with more respect, acknowledging her skill and incorporating her piano performances into parts of the rehearsal. Students who had once ignored her began to notice her more, seeking her input and listening to her music with genuine interest. She remained quiet in her demeanor, but the confidence in her eyes was unmistakable. She had transformed from the shy, overlooked girl into someone who commanded respect through her music alone. She continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces, experimenting with different styles, and pushing her limits. Every day, she felt her skills growing stronger, her confidence deepening. The piano had become more than just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, a voice that could express what words never could. She realized that the ridicule she had faced was not a reflection of her worth but a challenge to rise above, and she had done just that. Her peers began to seek her out for guidance, asking for tips on playing and listening to her perform. She offered gentle advice, encouraging them without arrogance, sharing the lessons she had learned through patience and practice. The choir leader, too, began to acknowledge her influence, using her talent as an example for other students, praising her dedication and skill. The transformation in the room was subtle but undeniable. She had changed not just for herself, but for those around her, inspiring them with her courage and talent. One afternoon, after a particularly long rehearsal, she stayed behind to practice a new piece she had been working on. The choir room was quiet, the other students gone, leaving her alone with the piano. She played softly at first, then louder, letting the music fill the space. Each note carried her emotions, her story, and her determination. She felt alive in a way she had never known before, fully connected to her talent and the joy it brought her. The piano was no longer just a part of her life. It was a part of who she was. As she walked home that evening, the sun setting in warm hues across the sky, she reflected on how far she had come. The fear, the ridicule, the self-doubt, they all seemed distant now. She had faced them, played through them, and emerged stronger. The music had been her guide, her companion, and her voice. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities to prove herself, but she felt ready. She had discovered the power within herself, and nothing could take that away. That night, she sat at her piano again, letting her fingers move freely over the keys. She played with passion, with joy, with the quiet determination that had carried her this far. She imagined the upcoming event, the audience waiting to hear her, and felt excitement rather than fear. The ridicule she had endured had been transformed into motivation, and she knew that her music had the power to leave a lasting impression. She was ready, and she would not hold back. The day of the big performance arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The school auditorium buzzed with anticipation as students and teachers filled the seats, waiting for the event to begin. She stood quietly backstage, her sheet music in hand, her fingers tapping nervously against her leg. The piano sat to one side of the stage, polished and shining under the bright lights. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mixture of fear and excitement. All the rehearsals, all the practice sessions, all the quiet hours at home had led to this moment. The choir leader took the stage first, giving a brief introduction and welcoming the audience. The students began their performances one by one, some singing solos, some in groups, each trying their best to impress. She watched from backstage, taking in the applause for each student, but her heart remained focused on what she would soon do. She reminded herself of every note she had practiced, every chord she had perfected. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music calm her nerves, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat align with the melodies she would play. Finally, it was her turn. The choir leader nodded at her, signaling it was time. She walked onto the stage slowly, trying to ignore the hundreds of eyes staring at her. Her heart pounded, and her palms were slightly sweaty, but she carried herself with quiet determination. She reached the piano, sat down, and placed her fingers on the keys. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience clearly, but she could feel their attention. She drew in a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft, gentle, and deliberate. They filled the auditorium with a calmness that made people stop and listen. The music started to weave a story, delicate and intricate, carrying emotion through every key she pressed. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note resonating deeply. The students on stage and in the audience sat in silence, captivated by the unexpected depth of her performance. The choir leader's usual critical expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly, listening with attention he had rarely given her before. As the piece progressed, the music grew bolder. She added flourishes, trills, and chords that she had carefully practiced, expressing feelings that words could not convey. She let her emotions guide her, allowing the music to flow freely and naturally. The audience was silent, completely immersed in the sound. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly, feeling the story the piano told. Others sat wide-eyed, astonished by the skill and passion she displayed. Every note seemed to carry a part of her soul, and the auditorium felt alive with the emotion she created. She felt her confidence growing with every passing moment. The fear that had gripped her backstage melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose and joy. She was no longer just performing for the audience. She was sharing a part of herself that had long remained hidden. The music seemed to resonate with everyone, bridging the gap between the quiet girl at the back of the choir and the people who had underestimated her. She could feel the collective breath of the audience, the silent anticipation hanging in the air, and it pushed her to give everything she had. The piece reached its climax, a powerful surge of emotion that filled the entire auditorium. Her fingers flew over the keys with precision, each note ringing out clearly and strongly. The music was alive, vibrant, and full of energy. She could sense the awe in the audience, the astonishment at the talent they had overlooked for so long. The choir leader, who had once ridiculed her, now watched with a mixture of surprise and respect. He had underestimated her, and she was proving that he had been wrong. As the final notes played, the auditorium was silent for a moment, the sound lingering in the air. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was hesitant, but it grew louder and louder, filling the room with appreciation. Students, teachers, and even parents stood, clapping and cheering. Some students wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the music. The sound of admiration washed over her, and she felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her talent, and the world had responded with awe. The choir leader finally stepped forward. His usual stern expression softened into a smile. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice carrying across the stage. "I underestimated you, and I apologize. Your talent is extraordinary." She nodded quietly, feeling the weight of his words, understanding the sincerity behind them. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, and now she stood victorious, not just in skill but in courage. After the performance, students and teachers came up to her, congratulating her and expressing their admiration. "I had no idea you could play like that," one student said. Another added, "You're amazing. That was beautiful." She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the applause. It was the satisfaction of knowing that she had remained true to herself, that she had let her music speak even when the world doubted her. The recognition was rewarding, but the journey she had taken to reach this point felt even more meaningful. Backstage, she sat quietly for a moment, letting the excitement settle. The piano had always been a part of her life, but tonight it had become a bridge to others, a way to share her emotions and her story. She realized that her talent was more than skill. It was a voice, a way to connect, to inspire, to move people. She thought about the times she had felt invisible, the moments of doubt, and how far she had come. The journey had been long, but it had led to this beautiful moment of recognition. In the days that followed, the impact of her performance was clear. Students who had once ignored her now sought her out, wanting to hear her play, asking for tips, or simply expressing admiration. Teachers complimented her dedication, and the choir leader, who had once been critical, now encouraged her growth and included her more prominently in rehearsals. The quiet girl had transformed into someone who commanded respect, not through loud words or attention-seeking, but through the power of her talent and the courage to share it. She continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces and expanding her repertoire. Every evening, she sat at the piano, letting her fingers move freely, experimenting with melodies, and expressing herself through music. She felt more alive than ever, confident that she could face challenges and still emerge stronger. The applause and recognition were rewarding, but it was the connection to her music, the ability to express herself fully, that mattered most. As she walked through the school hallways, she noticed the change in how people looked at her. There was respect in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of her talent. She no longer felt invisible. She felt seen, valued, and appreciated. The journey had taught her that true confidence comes not from seeking approval, but from believing in oneself and having the courage to share one's gifts. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice, guiding her through fear and doubt to a place of recognition and pride. One afternoon, she stayed behind in the empty auditorium, sitting at the piano and playing softly. The echoes of her music filled the space, bringing a sense of peace and satisfaction. She thought about the path she had taken, the moments of fear, the ridicule she had faced, and how all of it had led to this point. The music was a testament to her perseverance, her dedication, and her love for what she did. It was more than talent. It was a story of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of believing in oneself. That evening, as she walked home, the sun setting in golden hues, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The performance had been a turning point, a moment when her talent had finally been recognized, but it was also a reminder that the journey was ongoing. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments to prove herself. Yet she felt ready. The music had given her strength, and she knew that as long as she stayed true to herself, she could face anything. Sitting at her piano that night, she played with joy, letting the music carry her through every emotion. She imagined future performances, the faces of the audience, the feeling of the notes under her fingers, and the connection her music would create. The journey that began in quiet practice, in stolen moments of confidence, had blossomed into something extraordinary. She had transformed fear into courage, ridicule into recognition, and silence into a powerful voice. The piano had not just revealed her talent. It had revealed her strength, her heart, and her spirit to the world. The days following the performance were filled with a sense of wonder and excitement. She walked through the hallways, and students and teachers alike greeted her with smiles and compliments. No longer was she the quiet girl in the back who went unnoticed. She had become someone whose talent demanded recognition. The piano performance had changed how others saw her, but it had also changed how she saw herself. She felt stronger, more confident, and more willing to step out of the shadows. The choir leader approached her one morning, his tone different than usual. "I want to apologize for doubting you," he said. "Your performance was incredible. "You have a real gift, and I should have recognized it sooner." She nodded quietly, feeling a mix of pride and relief. The acknowledgement mattered, but more importantly, it showed that even someone harsh and critical could recognize the truth when it was undeniable. She had earned respect not through confrontation, but through dedication and courage. Word of her talent spread beyond the choir and the school. Other students came to hear her play, teachers suggested she participate in competitions, and her family felt proud in ways they had not expected. Invitations to perform at school events, local gatherings, and even community programs began to arrive. She was hesitant at first, still cautious of the spotlight, but each opportunity gave her a chance to grow and share her music. She realized that the piano was more than an instrument. It was her voice, her way of expressing feelings that words could not capture. With each new performance, her confidence blossomed. She continued to practice tirelessly, perfecting pieces and exploring new music. The piano became her companion, her sanctuary, and her way of connecting with others. Every note she played carried emotion. Every melody told a story. People began to notice not just her skill, but the heart she put into her performances. Audiences were moved, inspired, and sometimes even teary-eyed, touched by the beauty of her music. Her friends and family supported her every step of the way. They attended her performances, encouraged her practice, and celebrated her successes. Their belief in her reinforced her own confidence. She had once doubted herself, afraid of ridicule and rejection, but now she embraced her talent fully. She understood that the courage to play, to share her music despite fear, had opened doors she had never imagined. At school, the dynamic in the choir changed. Students who had once dismissed her began to respect her. They listened attentively to her advice, asked her for guidance, and celebrated her successes. She remained humble, never letting recognition make her arrogant, but she also no longer allowed herself to be overlooked. The choir leader, who had been so critical at first, became a mentor in some ways, guiding her through more complex pieces, giving her advice on performance, and encouraging her growth. Their relationship transformed from one of doubt and criticism to one of mutual respect. She started to mentor other students quietly, helping those who were shy or unsure of their own abilities. She remembered what it felt like to be ignored, ridiculed, and underestimated. She shared her experiences, offering encouragement and advice, helping them discover their own potential. She realized that her journey had not just been about personal success, but about inspiring others to believe in themselves. Her music became a bridge, connecting people, giving them courage, and showing them the power of persistence and dedication. Competitions and school events became opportunities for her to challenge herself further. She took on pieces that were more difficult, experimenting with different styles and emotions. Every performance was a learning experience, pushing her limits and strengthening her skills. The applause, the recognition, and the admiration she received were affirmations, but they were not her only motivation. She played because she loved it, because it allowed her to express herself, and because it gave her a sense of purpose that nothing else could provide. With each new performance, she grew more comfortable with the spotlight. She learned to channel her nerves into energy, to focus on the music rather than the audience, and to let her emotions guide her playing. She discovered the joy of connecting with others through music, the satisfaction of moving an audience, and the fulfillment of using her talent to inspire and uplift. Her piano had become an extension of herself, a voice that spoke when words were not enough. The recognition she received did not come without its challenges. She faced moments of self-doubt, moments when she questioned whether she could meet expectations or handle the pressure. But each time, she returned to the piano, finding solace and strength in the music she created. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It required dedication, practice, courage, and a willingness to face fear. She had learned this through experience, and it became a guiding principle in everything she did. Her family watched her grow with pride and amazement. They had always known she was talented, but seeing her share her gift with the world, seeing the impact she had on others, filled them with joy. They supported her every step, attending performances, helping with practice, and celebrating milestones. She had once feared judgment and ridicule, but now she embraced the recognition and used it as motivation to continue improving. As she continued to perform, she noticed the change in how people interacted with her. Students approached her with admiration, teachers sought her guidance, and the choir leader relied on her talent to enhance the performances. She had transformed from a quiet, overlooked student into someone whose skill and dedication were valued and respected. The piano had not only revealed her talent but also her courage, resilience, and determination. The lessons she learned extended beyond music. She understood the importance of believing in herself, of facing fear, and of using her abilities to inspire others. She realized that talent was not enough without the courage to share it. She learned to handle criticism, to embrace challenges, and to persist despite doubt. Her journey had shaped her into a confident, compassionate, and capable individual, ready to face any challenge with determination and grace. One evening, after a long day of practice and a small performance at a community event, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on her journey. The room was still, filled only with the gentle hum of the instrument as she played softly. She thought about the choir leader who had once ridiculed her, the students who had doubted her, and the moments of fear and hesitation she had experienced. She realized that each of these moments had contributed to her growth, shaping her into the musician and person she had become. Her fingers moved over the keys with ease, each note carrying her story, her emotions, and her experiences. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had touched others, inspired them, and perhaps even changed their perceptions. She had turned ridicule into recognition, doubt into confidence, and silence into a powerful voice. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her guide, leading her through challenges and toward triumph. She knew that her journey was ongoing. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. But she felt ready, equipped with the skills, confidence, and courage she had gained through her experiences. She understood that the piano was more than an instrument. It was a tool for connection, expression, and empowerment. Through her music, she could reach others, inspire them, and leave a lasting impact. Her story became a source of inspiration for many. Students who had once doubted themselves saw in her an example of perseverance and courage. Teachers and community members admired her dedication and skill. The choir leader, who had once underestimated her, became a witness to her growth, recognizing that true talent and courage could not be ignored. She had proven that quiet determination and hidden potential could overcome criticism and doubt. As she continued to perform and share her music, she carried with her the lessons of her journey. That courage could triumph over fear, that perseverance could overcome obstacles, and that true talent could not remain hidden forever. Her piano had become a symbol of her journey, a voice that spoke of resilience, passion, and the power of believing in oneself. Each performance was a reminder of how far she had come and a promise of the limitless possibilities that lay ahead. In the end, she realized that her talent had always been there, waiting for the right moment to shine. The ridicule, the doubt, and the fear had only made her stronger, more determined, and more capable of achieving her dreams. The applause and recognition were meaningful, but the greatest reward was the knowledge that she had faced her fears, embraced her abilities, and shared her gift with the world. The music had transformed her life, revealing her strength, her courage, and her heart, and it would continue to guide her for years to come.